guest exclusive podcast right here on the tradcatnight.org website, folks. Today is October the 10th, 2020. A few days until the Feast of Fatima, Feast Day of Fatima. So I ask you all to continue to keep this apostolate in your prayers. I want to thank all those who recently donated to Tradcat Night and those who will continue to do so. You are in part which keeps me with the ability to do this work full time. And I can't thank you all enough for your prayers and support. Folks, can't stress this enough. We go and grow on your charity. Make sure you mention tradcatnight.org in person, spread it around, word of mouth. Tradcatnight.org is doing quite well these days in regards to more and more people signing up every month. And we haven't even hit the second lockdowns by and large, too. I'm expecting a massive uptick in membership once we hit that area, once we get to that point, which could be soon, by the way, given based upon what some of my analysts are saying on the program over the last week or so. We've got a great program lined up for you this afternoon with Gearóid Colmáin, who now writes for the Irish Patriot, by the way, so we can check him out there. We've had Niall on the program before in times past. He's got his own show over there as well. We'll get all the juicy details on that, but I know Gearóid wants to talk about the new encyclical, right? We want to talk what's going on with Armenia and the latest with that, a kerfuffle, if you will. We're going to be talking Ireland ID 2020, some latest quote-unquote anti-Semitism news happening there in France or whatnot. But before we hand it over to our good friend of the program, who will be joining us in the November conference too, by the way. I just contacted Katie, who does the banners and does the promo videos. We're going to get rolling on that. So November the 21st, Gearóid will be there. That is going to be an awesome, awesome conference. My goodness, some of the top names from around the world will be at that one. But don't forget about next weekend, October the 17th, Resisting the Satanic World Order Conference, which will feature Dr. James Fetzer, Dr. Paul Cottrell, Leo Zagami, John X. Army, and myself. Be sure to pick up your ticket now. And last but not least, folks, if you want to join the sponsorship program, contact me at apostlemary@hotmail.com. I'm running vastly reduced rates for the next few months in an effort to get more people involved. Kathleen L. Loney is the woman you need to go to in regards to the 3 Days of Darkness kits. So please contact her at KathleenLLoney@gmail.com. She will help you and your family put together an awesome kit. I got a complimentary copy within this past year. And it's beautiful, and it's most necessary given the headlines that we see in our times. Without further delay, buddy, where would you like to begin today? So much happening in the world. Of course, we even got Trump supposedly catching coronavirus. I'm not necessarily sold on that, as some of my guests are. Who knows?
Yeah.
Let's go.
I mean, no. I mean, we could start. We could start with Trump, but I mean, it's. I mean, the one thing you can say about what's going on in the United States, particularly with Trump, is that it's just, it's a thriller movie, you know. It's like, you know,
a Tom Clancy novel.
Yeah, I mean, we got to the point where, you know, politics has become a TV series, and you're sort of watching it, and it's like, this is the next episode, the next trick, and so on. Yeah, I mean. You know, I think that I don't know. I think that I don't believe he got anything. I think this was a psyop to wrongfoot the Democrats and to you know, to basically sort of say the COVID-19 is not a big deal. I got it, and look, I mean, afterwards he said he was like 20 years younger and he felt better than he was 20 years ago, and then there's all these drugs. So, like, in other words, it's not very, two messages. It's not bad, and even if you get it, there are drugs anyway. So, what are you afraid of? But then I think there's also this sort of, I think, a desire to make the Democrats become obsessed about his health, which is what is happening on the media. Like, oh, Trump was coughing. You know, has he really recovered? You know, so I'd say it's bizarre. I don't want to talk about Trump so much in this show. I wanted to just mention a few things. I guess we can start with we just mentioned the Pope there,
yeah.
Pope Francis, and I don't know. Did you read his encyclical? I read it this week. And,
yeah, I read it, and I'm doing a
Tutti
whole.
fratelli, fratelli tutti. It's. I mean, it's unbelievable. He quotes himself right throughout it. You notice that all the references are to his own writings.
That's Francis the
it's
Humble,
like,
though.
yeah, I mean, as I said in another encyclical, the great Pope Francis, like, it's astonishing. It really is. I mean, obviously, at this stage, he really thinks that he's basically, writing a new magisterium, and that's what's happening. But one of the things I noticed about it was when he talked about healthy politics and healthy debate, and this is real communitarian speak. Healthy debate is debate which is politically correct. He talks about avoiding debates where we have major arguments, but isn't that meant to be the purpose of debate? I mean, debate is meant to be you're wrong and I'm right. That's a debate.
Yeah.
Not we're both right and we just have a debate about what we agree on. So this is kind of obviously the kind of debates that he wants to have is like, yeah, there is climate change and it is, man is the cause of it, and therefore we'll have a little discussion about that. But so this kind of emphasis on healthy debate and healthy politics. Healthy politics, of course, is left-wing politics. All left-wing causes, and the only kind of healthy politics. So it's pure Freemasonry. The whole thing from the beginning to end. It's the brotherhood of man.
Yeah, liberty, fraternity, equality, all throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, and I guess they're just pushing ahead with this, but we've come to the point where, will there be schism in the church? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's going to happen? For example, if he gets rid of the Latin Mass, there's talk of that here in the Society of Pius X, that the Latin Mass could be banned again. So I don't know what's going to happen, in terms of the traditional church and how they're going to survive, because here in France, like the Society of St. Pius X are really the last bulwark against all this. There's they really are taking care of their community. They're there's no masks, there's no social distancing, there's no nonsense, and of course they have their own media, so they're
right.
They're very well informed, they're well organized, and the congregations are well educated as well. So it's just when you really see the difference now between, I keep saying that the last normal people in the world will be Catholics. That people will realize the Catholics are, the old norm. They live in the way most people used to live before, right? They don't go around with fear all the time.
No, I've said that for a while now too. I think Protestantism is going to begin to fade. I think there's going to be a lot of Protestants to convert here soon, realizing like there's no middle ground between Catholicism and the New Age, basically. I mean, there's so many different ways we can put it: globalism, socialism, all that stuff. So I do believe there's going to be an awful lot of conversions to happen. But that's an interesting point. Now, when you mentioned the society priests, do you mean specifically for Europe, or do you mean across the board? Because I know, I'm sure you saw this as well, that Francis has gone ahead and changed the Italian Missal and changed the words of consecration around to invalidate the new Mass. And this is where I go back, and I've told my audience that I believe the State of a Contest were right on the point where right out of the get-go, after Vatican II, and then the new liturgy was put out in 1969, the words of consecration were read for all as opposed to for the many. And the Council of Trent actually forbade that language specifically. I'll go over that in my book. But now then Benedict came onto the scene, and he changed it back properly. And I was like, okay, now I'm there at the point where, I would still tell people to stay away from the Novus Ordo, but I didn't think it was invalid. Now Francis comes onto the scene again. Now he's going to change it back. Any whisperings from the society priests on that, or just you? And what do you?
One of the discussions here that obviously the synodal, what they're referring a lot here to the synodal church, that now we're moving kind of from Vatican II to the synodal church, and it's from the conciliar rather than the synodal church. So the emphasis is on democracy in the church and so on and so forth. Basically deconstructing the hierarchy. And so there's been a lot of discussion on that. But just on, I know we don't have much time. I didn't want to go too much into the encyclical, but one of the things I wanted to mention here as well is that Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said recently in an interview that he said the beast of an event is here. It's an expression a bit than a monstrous event. He referred to COVID-19 as a monstrous event, but bête is French for beast. In other words, it pretty much telling people, this is the beast system. I mean, we're in it. It's here. The only question now is whether it's the beginning or whether, it's kind of how much time do we have? That's really the only question now. I mean, we're definitely in a new phase from since this thing started in March. So, it's quite significant. Things are moving very, very fast. Obviously, bars are closing down here. They've closed the bars down. There's something very weird about this kind of obsession with closing down bars. It's like, I made a point about that recently. They're closing down bars. They're banning alcohol in certain parts of France.
Really?
In Lyon, for example, they've closed down off licenses. Now, this is on the pretext of, everybody's going to turn to drink, right? Because they're going to be so depressed and because of what's going on. And I guess that's true to a certain extent. But there's a kind of a perverse aspect to this. And it just seems to me that I think that when I think that in the long term, they're going to ban meat and they're going to ban alcohol eventually, because the whole trend of society is towards this sort of perverse view of health, like washing your hands all the time. And it's like everything is perverted, right? So I think that in the next 10 years, you're not going to be allowed to kill any animals. You're not, everything's going to be sacred. And I think alcohol is going to be one of these things that's going to be banned eventually, because they're going to legalize marijuana because that makes you much more docile. But
zombies, yeah.
And it's much less social. If you go into these marijuana bars, nobody talks to each other because they're out of their mind. So I mean, people drunk are like that too, but drink sort of tends to be much more of a kind of a social thing. People go to a pub to talk to someone else, and so that's what they're really trying to stop here, is just going to a social space and having a normal relationship with other people.
Yeah. Dehumanizing this. Yeah.
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 So that's going on. I wanted to mention the recent war in the Caucasus, because there's a few points there. There's a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and of course this has been going on for a while, since the 1990s, since the fall of the Soviet Union. It's a complicated story. There's essentially, Armenia has occupied a region of Azerbaijan called Nagorno-Karabakh, and there was a war in the 1990s, a really brutal war, a lot of massacres, particularly by the Armenians. This has been breaking out. There's been a kind of ceasefire since then, and it's never been resolved. And this erupted again recently, and so there's a lot at play here, particularly because I think that this region of the world, the Caucasus, is very, very unstable. Turkey is on the march. I've mentioned that before. Turkey is a new major, global player, and has its own ambitions and its own interests, and is expanding, massively, and is very much behind the Islamization of Europe, and wants to be, Erdogan's aim is to sort of reestablish the caliphate and to be the leader and to reestablish Ottoman, sort of neo-Ottoman power. So there's a few things here that kind of I think are interesting, but not being discussed in the media about this. And one is that the leader in Armenia, Pashinyan, was put in power in 2018 by Soros and the globalist agencies. It was a color revolution, essentially, to liberalize the country. Liberalizing meaning, gay rights, the whole gamut of what liberalism means nowadays. Um, and so basically the Pashinyan regime in Armenia is a Soros-backed regime, um, and it probably hasn't delivered as much as the globalists want, but they were clearly responsible for breaking the ceasefire in this. I think Armenia is definitely the culprit here. But the point I wanted to make about this is that there's something very interesting, very, very strange about Armenia, and that is that in France in 2012, the French government passed a law banning any questioning of the Armenian genocide. Now, I don't know if you've studied any of that. As a Christian, our first instinct would be kind of to not be too surprised that Christians get massacred and so on. And I've certainly seen some horrible pictures of it. And there were massacres that took place in Turkey. But when governments start passing laws banning any discussion of a genocide in another country, you've got to ask Christian why. And the reason why, I believe, is that, first of all, the Armenia functions through its global diaspora. It has a huge diaspora in France, very powerful, in America and other countries. And the French inherited part of the Middle East after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, particularly Sicilia near Syria there, when the French got Syria, Lebanon. And there was a part that's now, I believe, Turkey, which was Sicilia, which was pretty much occupied by Armenians. And so they kind of had, this, basically the French have been using this Armenian genocide as a geopolitical tool against Turkey, because in Europe right now, the French are vying for control of Europe with Turkey. They know that Turkey eventually will probably enter the European Union because there's so many Muslims in Europe now. The Turks will enter, but when the Turks enter, they'll control the European Union because they're more powerful. They have a bigger army than France. And so France wants to be the top army. It wants to be the trainer of the European army. So there's a kind of a power struggle between these two elites, the Turks and the French. And this has been going on for a while. I've been writing about it. It's more or less a covert war, you could say, because the French are backing the Kurds in Syria. That's causing a lot of tension with Ankara. And in this conflict, again, the French are major brokers in the peace process with Armenia and Azerbaijan. So come back to this genocide issue. There is a historian in America, Justin McCarthy. He's maybe one of the only historians in the West who's written about this, who's a dissident on this issue, and he believes that it wasn't a genocide. He believes that it was what happened in Armenia was that the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, was obviously being attacked by the British and the French in the First World War. The goal of the First World War, and we forget that, it's never mentioned, but the goal of the First World War was to prevent the Berlin-Baghdad railway, and which would have given Germany access to oil in the Middle East, and particularly Baku in Azerbaijan. And there was an alliance at the time between the Germans and the Ottomans, and the British were backing separatist groups in the Ottoman Empire. The Turks, the Greeks, they'd already backed the Greeks in the 19th century, but they were backing, sorry, not the Turks, but the Armenians. They were backing all these groups, the Serbs and so on. And, it was the same in the Middle East, right? They were saying to the Arabs, rise up and we'll give you independence. And the British Foreign Office at the time, you had Toynbee, the famous historian Toynbee, and you had Lord Viscount Bryce, who was an Irish aristocrat, had been former Secretary of Ireland in the British Empire. These were two strategists as well of British imperial policy, and they'd written a lot about Armenia, and they were major Armenophiles. They'd gone to Armenia, and they thought that basically Armenia would be the key strategic point for destabilizing the Ottoman Empire, because the Armenians were very nationalist. Again, Armenian history is quite extraordinary. They were an empire in the past. They have quite they have a long history, and so the British felt that we could work with them. We can use the Armenians, and so this historian Justin McCarthy claims that there was massacres on all sides. The Armenian nationalists, they had these nationalist groups called the Hunchaks and the Dashnaks, I believe, and they were committing massacres against the Turks. In fact, according to McCarthy, there were even more Turks killed in this civil war within the First World War as the Ottoman Empire was disintegrating. I don't doubt that there were massacres against the Armenians as well, and atrocities. But he says, that there were massacres on both sides. And, from my experience studying genocides, I've studied Rwanda and everything else, many, many other contemporary genocides, Syria, Yugoslavia, it tends to be that more than, one side being completely massacred. I don't know what the truth is about this, but now it's actually illegal in France to question the Armenian genocide. I mean, how absurd is that? It's illegal to talk about a genocide in another century, in another country. It's illegal to question it. So why is that? I think it's because this has become a political tool, and it's also a process of basically judges taking over history, right? The Ministry of Truth, like any official genocide now, when something becomes an officially sanctioned genocide, that's it. There's no, and so now you have, Clooney, the actor, what's his name? George Clooney's wife. She's a major lobbyist for the Armenians. Now, on the other side, it's not. Erdogan is a backer of terrorism in Syria. Assad in Syria claims that he's redeploying terrorists now against the Armenians. The Azerbaijanis in their history have committed atrocities against the Armenians, particularly in 1920, where they killed about 20,000 Armenians. So this is a really, I think, a lot of people are saying it, and I think that this broke out in 2016, and it's been sort of, worsening for the last few years. I think that we could be seeing the beginning of major conflict in the Caucasus, and this whole region, Turkey, the Eastern Mediterranean, it's been erupting for a long time.
And around the world too. Have you seen what's been happening there with China and Taiwan in recent times? I know we're obligated to stand behind Taiwan. If anything happens over there, we'll be kind of dragged over into that situation. Just in general, USA and China hasn't been going too well. Then the whole Middle East peace thing going on, which you and I know is a complete fabrication. I did want to get you to comment on Ireland, though, because we've got quite a few listeners from Ireland. Break down what's the latest happening on the ID 2020 front, Gearóid, because we only have about 5 minutes
they're bringing. I mean, I think Ireland is a kind of laboratory for a lot of globalist ideas, because it's been so globalized. We're a postmodern country, and it's sort of it's a free for all, for globalist ideas and for globalist projects, and there's no real resistance to it. And so you've got this new idea now, or this new ID rather, that's being brought out, ID 2020, and it's already been tried in Britain, and they're going to roll it out in Ireland. And it's basically, you're not going to be able to travel unless you have an ID, which, shows your vaccination records, your test results, or whatever. So I don't know how. I mean, that's just. I mean, are people going to get it? Are people? I don't know. It's hard to know when you go out there in society and you see everybody with a mask. Does everybody really believe it? The Irish I mean, we're now in lockdown again in Ireland. The counties, there's basically, you're not allowed to leave your county, so it's a new lockdown. Bars are closed again.
Okay.
And they're in phase. They have these different phases. Phase 2, 3, 4, whatever. We're in phase 3, and the media are saying we're going to go to phase 5. In other words, total lockdown.
Oh joy.
Now, when that happens, like, the reality is that's going to lead to absolute chaos and eventually food shortages. Not only poverty, but food shortages. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. That's what
And
they want. Yeah.
that's what they want. And I think this is a big problem. I see that in Ireland, and I see that here, that people think that they want the economy to work, and they just don't get it. They just don't get that they don't want that.
Hmm. Yeah, buddy. It's
What they
awful
want
lot.
is they want to replace the current economy with artificial intelligence under their control. It's a completely different paradigm.
Yeah, digital economy, no doubt about it. Everything will be tied to it. There'll be a central bank, of course, in play. It'll be tied to a social credit system, so where if you're stupid enough to take it, they can still turn your chip off down the road. So, yeah, it's awful lot happening here, Gearóid. We're appreciative of your time here, buddy. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time. I do
But
want
just
to
to
get you.
finish,
Yeah, sure. Go
yeah,
ahead.
just to finish, the you know, I heard somewhere recently someone said that COVID-19 actually means certificate of vaccination ID
Hmm.
artificial intelligence,
Oh,
and
okay.
whether or not that is what they what they mean by it, it is certainly it is symbolically what it means. I mean, it's a certificate of vaccination ID. That's what
That
COVID-19
does
is.
fit. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is what it's been about from the very start. There's no question about that.
Yep, gain further control of the police state, if you will. It's happening worldwide, folks. You just heard Gearóid mention it's Ireland too, Israel on fresh lockdown, parts of Spain. You've got various major cities in Canada. New York City's on new fresh lockdown. They have now in place, not sure if you saw this one, $1,000 fine for those who don't social distance. So yeah, more mask laws assuredly to come, more social distancing laws, all this nonsense. So it's definitely going to be interesting, buddy. Before we let you go, we want to give you a few minutes here to do some shameless self-promotion time. So please do so and hang off air for a minute. We'll get you scheduled for next month.
Yeah, it's you can get to my website on GOC News Gearóid, Gearoid. So GOC News Gearoid. That's the easiest way to find it. GOC News Gearóid, Gearoid. So you can find me there. Please contribute if you can. Contact me if you have any questions.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to those conferences coming up, because I think they're really necessary in these times.
Yes, and you'll be participating on the 21st. So looking forward to that. Folks, thank you all for tuning in to Trad Cat Night special guest exclusive podcast for this October the 10th, 2020. Until next time, stay safe and God bless.